Hi, and welcome to the 50th episode of Safest Family on the Block. I'm your host, Jason, and with me today is, well, really, all of you. For our 50th episode, I asked the audience to give 50 excellent questions about family safety and child safety, and promised to provide 50 answers. Some of these answers I gave in an exclusive preview over on the Facebook channel, and so you'll see those spliced in among the answers that I give today. Thank you everybody for sending in such great questions. Thank you everybody for your support in these first months of the channel. Now let's get started. Number 1. Only about 10% of recalled customer products are returned or repaired. How do I keep up on news about dangerous products? That is a great question, and we were fortunate enough to have Rita R. Robinson on the show early on to talk to us about product safety, and this was part of what she's told us. And the situation is that once upon a time when traditional publication, traditional newspapers, traditional media was still going on, there was somebody's job at almost every newspaper in the country to keep up on product recalls by checking in with the Consumer Product Safety Commission and then reporting those recalls in an issue each week, each month. Now that system has broken down completely, so it's on us as parents and as consumers to find out what products have been recalled. And we can do that at the recall page at the Consumer Product Safety Commission, and we can also find that out over at recall.gov. And we should check that on a regular basis just to see about any of our new purchases that somebody didn't do the best safety check on, that there were maybe a defect in production, or somebody decided that a Claymore landmine was an important part of a crib. So we can go online and find that information at those two sites. We'll make sure the links are in the show notes here. And then the other thing you can do is you can kill two birds with one stone by shopping those clearance sales as new models go off, or new models come on and old models go off. The reason for that being is A, we save a bit of money, and second, once that product's been on for long enough to end up on clearance, most of the time the retailers, who are very responsible usually about keeping track of recalls, have already pulled out the ones that are bad. Question number 2. How do I navigate my family through a dangerous crowd? If you've been following my feeds, you may have noticed that I am alternately heartbroken and infuriated that that remains a relevant question for the United States right now. Whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, I think we can all agree that this is some rookie developing world nonsense that we should figure out how to get past. But in the meantime, it is a real risk. So again, you'll see this one covered. I did a couple of short skills and drills videos about this very thing, about surviving civil unrest. And the most important thing is to get your family close to you. If you have small children, get them in what I call your physical shadow. So they're like directly in front of you so you can even hunch over them a little bit. Get them in a place where your body will protect them from the jostling of the crowd. Move with the crowd if the crowd's not moving directly towards danger, looking all the time for some kind of exit, whether that's a door that you can open, whether that's an alley, whether it's a park or open field where you can just exit the flow of traffic. Keep a low profile. Don't draw the attention of either the police or the protesters. When you're in the middle of civil unrest or even a soccer riot, the less attention you get, the better. Never stop moving. Anybody who's been in a mosh pit knows that if you stop moving, you fall down. So keep moving with the people, keep moving with the direction of traffic, and if you can, stick close to a wall. That wall creates one side, a kind of a lee side, where you don't have to worry about the side of you that's close to the wall, and you can focus your attention on the other side. So that's how you get your family safely through a dangerous crowd, or even a really thick crowd that's enthusiastic. We all remember those times, some concerts where people died tragically because the crowd was out of control. In either of those cases, that's how you get your family out and get them safe. Question number 3, how do I properly install a child safety seat? So this is more complex than most of us can even imagine. The last statistics I read said that about 80% of child safety seats are improperly installed. Now, your best bet is to not listen to me because I don't know your car seat, but go find the video from your car seat manufacturer for the specific model that you have. It'll be on YouTube. Put it in following the instructions exactly, and once you've done that, go find an event where they are checking and installing car seats and have them check your work. You'll often find these at fire stations, but
there's no guarantee that the firefighters are specifically trained on installing car seats or installing that model. Where if you go to an actual car seat installation event, those people are certified technicians who know how to do this, how to show you how to do this, and even how to teach people how to do this. Now, for some basics, a few just rules of thumb that are fairly consistent across models. Number one, if you can at all, put it in the center of the backseat of your car. That's the safest location for it. Number two, once you've installed it, try to wiggle it. If you can move it more than an inch, it's not in right. Do it again. Number three, when you put your baby in it, the chest clips should be level with the armpits. That distributes the pressure that if you do have to stop suddenly and the baby comes forward, it's going to put that pressure across the strongest parts of its body so that it reduces the chances of injury. And then once your child is buckled in, try to pinch the shoulder harness, and if you can, it's too loose and you need to tighten it further. And kind of related, in the wintertime, don't put your baby in the car seat wearing a thick coat. Instead, take the coat off, put them in the car seat, get them tight in the car seat, and then drape the coat or a blanket over the top of them. Because that looseness and that give in a thick winter jacket will prevent the car seat from working right. All right. Question number 4. I worry so much when I'm not around. How do I trust people to keep my kids safe if I don't know them? And I think that's one of the big problems for a lot of parents, where we do a good job, we think, on taking care of them when we're in our presence, but we can't be there all the time. We're not going to be with our kid at every baseball practice. We're not going to be with our kids when they go to college. We're not going to enlist with our kids in the military and go off on deployment and keep them safe. At some point, we have to trust other adults and other responsible people to keep our kids safe, and eventually that we've turned our kids into responsible adults who keep themselves safe. Now, in terms of you're in a situation where your kid's still a kid and there's an adult responsible for them, and you want to know if you can trust that adult to keep them safe, ask questions and ask for references. And research that person, that organization to the nines, find out what kind of experience they have, ask them questions about both general child safety and how much they know about the thing that they've volunteered to do. And then beyond that, ask for references. Ask for the contact information if someone's worked with them in the past. And once you talk to that person, ask that person, that reference, for the name of somebody else who's worked with them. One thing that happens is if anytime you ask someone for a reference, you know this because you've applied for a job at least once in your life, you're going to give them the people who you know will say nice things about you. This person will do the same thing. But if you then ask that person for other people who know them and go down that rabbit hole 3 or 4 levels, eventually you will find the person who has a problem. Because everybody has someone who has a problem with them. And then you're not looking for someone who doesn't have a problem, but what you're looking for is, what was the problem? And how was that problem handled? And then you can go ask the person who's going to be responsible for your kid about their thought about the problem. But short version of all that, if you are worried about your kid being kept safe when other adults are responsible for them, ask for references and ask direct questions. And that's the best way that you can get both the information as to whether or not your kid will be safe, and also just a little peace of mind so you're not sweating and fretting the entire time they're out of your sight. Question number 5. 2 children die every day from accidental poisonings, and more are injured by poisons and harmful chemicals. How can we best prevent this? This is one of those things that's really simple, but not necessarily easy. And just lock up your nasties. Whatever it is, your cleaning supplies, your prescription medications, your over-the-counter medications, your hobby supplies, anything that's toxic, anything that's caustic, lock it up and double up on that. Lock it up somewhere high, so both the height and the fact that it's locked are deterrents to your kids getting into it. And then the other thing is to be especially vigilant when you're using the nasty stuff. If your one example, although this isn't a toxin, is a hot cup of tea that's placed down on the counter just kind of absently within reach of a toddler, and that creates second-degree burns. Or if you take your prescription medication and then the phone rings or your kid calls you and you just accidentally leave it there on the counter and then later on your child discovers it. When you're using your cleaners and cleansers, cleaning up the bathroom, making sure that you position them in a place where you're between your children and the stuff. And if you do that, again, it's it's simple, but it's not necessarily that easy because it requires a level of vigilance that we're kind of tired to do all the time. But just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not worth doing. So that's answer number 5. Question number 6, how do I stay safe driving on the freeway? And I'm going to give a thank you and a shout out to Justin Schorr and Justin Schorr, the motor cop and paramedic captains who answered some questions in a couple of different videos about what we can do different and better to keep our kids safe. And between them, they came up with 5 key things that we can do when driving on the freeway to make sure that we're safe. And the first one is just slow down. Other Jason, not this Jason, but Justin Schorr, says that you can break the speed laws, you can break the motor vehicle laws, but you cannot break the laws of physics, Captain. Slowing down means that you can react to dangers and unanticipated situations more effectively. It means that if you fail to react, the impact will hurt you less. Slow down. That's number 1. Number 2, we should put our phones away. I am terrible about this, as my lovely and talented wife Rachel will tell you. I routinely mess with my phone when I shouldn't, and that's kind of a New Year's resolution based on some things that Jason and Justin told me. Put your phone away. If you need to use the GPS, hook it up to your Bluetooth or turn up the volume, have a passenger use it. But yeah, right now, distraction because of the phone is killing more people than drunk driving. So let's put our phones away. Number 3, don't put your feet on the dash when you're driving or when you're in the passenger seat. Keeping in mind that airbag that's right there in the dashboard is essentially a Claymore landmine aimed at your seat. And if your feet are up there, that's not a good position to be in if that landmine goes off. The same can be said for the seats in back with your kids. Just keeping our feet on the floor, keeping our bodies in a safe position so that if there is an impact, the safety features in the vehicle will actually do their jobs rather than actually make our lives worse. Number 4, avoid rural highways when you can. The main difference between a freeway and a highway is a freeway has a big physical divider between the traffic going that way and the traffic going this way. When you get on a rural highway, all it is that yellow painted line. So somebody who's drunk, somebody who's not paying attention, somebody who tried to pass when it wasn't really safe to pass, they can come into your lane. And then when you do a head-on collision, you're adding your speed to their speed. Whereas on a highway, you're not going to get into a head-on collision. So when you can, avoid rural highways, stick to the freeways, especially at night, especially on the big drunk driving holidays like New Year's, Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July. And finally, pull over early and often. If something's happening that's going to distract you from your driving, whether it's grabbing a snack out of a cooler in the back seat, whether it's talking to your kids about something they're doing, whether it's checking a map, whatever it is, those 30 seconds, 2 minutes of progress we might lose just pulling over to do that, they're a very worthwhile investment of time. It's not the funnest thing, but it's the safest thing. All right, question number 7. Stranger danger is one thing, but most pedophiles are people we know. How do I protect my kid from the monster next door? And rule number 1 of that is trust your intuition. Your brain and your sensory system have evolved over millions of years to make you a stone badass detector of danger and ill intent. Intuition is your subconscious picking up on 100 or 1,000 little cues of body language, scent, tone of voice, proximity, voice tone, voice choice, word choice. Hundreds, thousands of little inputs that all get together to create just kind of a feeling of something's not right here. Listen to that. Respect that. And teach your kids to respect that. And that's how you're going to get a sense of who's right in your circle and who's wrong in your circle. And also back that up by keeping communication open with your child. Make sure they know they can tell you anything. Even if they were threatened, make sure that they know that if someone threatens to hurt them, if they tell, that they should still tell and that you'll protect them. One thing that has been happening a lot in recent years is bad guys threatening to hurt a child's parents if the child tells what's going on. and just make sure your kids know that they are welcome to try, and that you'll keep them safe, and you'll keep yourself safe as well. Keeping that line of open communication so your child feels they can come to you no matter what is that second line of defense. Alrighty, question number 8. How do I protect my child from drowning? And this is one of the big ones. A lot of people like to play in water. I like to play in water. Kids love water. Water recreation is part of so many people's lives, and drowning happens every year, and it's tragic and it's awful. It happened to my family a long time ago to a cousin who was about my age, and it's just awful. And there are 3 key things to protect your child from drowning. First of all, be there or have an engaged, trained adult there. The best way to prevent a child from drowning is make sure that there are adults watching them in the water and near the water, close enough that they can intercede in time. Full stop. A sober, engaged adult watching them in the water. Second one, swimming lessons early, swimming lessons often. Now, the experts do not recommend those infant swimming lessons that got popular about 10 years ago, where you may have seen the video that they threw up, I guess, 2-month-old, 3-month-old in the water, and they were able to swim to safety. And it made good video, but what those programs didn't do was reduce drownings. What they did do was create more complacent parents. So that's not recommended, although some of those get used to water, baby and parent classes where you get in the water and play in the water together can be very helpful. But yeah, having kids who know how to swim is clearly a very good deterrent against drowning. And then the third one is, if you have water at your home, use the technologies. There are gates around swimming pools, there are alarms to put on your door, there are countless different kinds of technology that can help you make sure that the water near your home is safe. One thing that I found out about in my interview with Justin Schorr is there's a little float that you can put in your swimming pool that will either make a loud audible alarm or send an alert to your phone if that water is disturbed by somebody getting into the pool. So you'll know if someone gets in the pool, or if there's a high wind, but the occasional false alarm is not a bad thing. Then that can help keep your kids safe. So again, be there or have an engaged, sober, trained adult there. Swimming lessons early and often. And if you have water near your home, use the technologies available to make that water safer. Question number 9. What should I do if someone tries to rob me in a parking garage? Give them your stuff. Don't engage. Say as little as possible. Try not to offend the person. Try not to frighten the person. And keep your kids on the other side of you and comply. They can have anything they want except your life and your kids. There's no reason to get into a tussle over that kind of situation. Now, better yet, be on high alert in parking garages. Don't hesitate to ask for an escort or to just turn around and go back inside for a while. If you have a funny feeling, pay attention to where you park in that parking garage to reduce that kind of danger and risk. But if that doesn't work and you are accosted and you are robbed, just give them your stuff. It's not worth it. That brings us to question number 10, and this is a big one. So I'm anticipating some fun little comments on this, but the question was asked, and I think it needs answering, which is, I'm worried about crime, and especially home invasions. Should I get a gun? Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not a gun guy. I'm not an anti-gun guy. I feel about guns the same way I feel about my table saw. They are tools that have a use, that their presence in a home makes the home somewhat more dangerous, but also that usage can be important to some people and some families. My answer about it, should I get a gun, is largely the same as my answer about should I get martial arts training, should I get pepper spray, should I get a knife. And if you've done your research, gotten meaningful training with a firearm that you want to get, thought deeply about what happens if you use it, before you use it, when you use it, after you use it, are certain that you are willing to use it and know how to use it appropriately, and you've thought about and made the right steps about storing the weapon and how having a kid in the house interacts with your children, if you've done that thought, taken that training, then yes, a gun could be a viable option. On the other hand, if your answer to those questions I just asked is no, or not yet, then no, you should not get a gun, or you should not get a gun yet. Most dangerous situations are made more dangerous with a gun. And all dangerous situations are made more dangerous with a gun in the hands of somebody who hasn't done the training and the thought responsible to use that gun properly. So I know that's not an easy answer, but it is the answer as far as I've been able to tell.
Number 11. How do I teach my kid to navigate the world, recognizing and dealing with the risks? Now, this is a tricky one because one of the places that a lot of parents have trouble, I know I did, is navigating that change between when we have authority over our kids and when all we have is influence. As they go out into the world as adults, and we want to teach them to be adults who can go out there and do what they need to do and have fun and have adventures, but also come home safely. Now, to me, the key on that is signal to noise. There's a lot of stuff going on out there, a lot of distractions, a lot of temptations, and a lot of what you might call a false positive for danger. We're taught by the media, by our own evolutionary responses, to pay a lot of attention to the things that aren't very likely, but to ignore the things that are more serious. I mean, how many people will go to a handgun class and eat McDonald's on the way home? How many people are worried about shark attacks but speed on the way to the beach? So teaching our kids to pay attention to the most important safety things while freeing up mental space from the stuff that's not very likely, that's not very important, I think is one of the best ways to do this. And of course, to do that, you lead by example, by showing them yourself, paying attention to the important stuff, sweating the small things that matter, but not the small things that don't matter, taking care of yourself, staying alert, getting skills that you might not have, preparing properly but not obsessively, and just live in the world the way we want our kids to live. And of course, listen to and honor their instincts. When your child comes to you and says they have a bad feeling about something, even if they're wrong, it's important to sit and listen and talk about it in a way that helps them feel that you honor their instincts and looked at the thing that made them feel weird, and then together figured out that it wasn't a risk. And then finally, give them the skills. Make sure they take first aid. Make sure they know how to do a self-Heimlich. Make sure they do take some self-defense classes and some defensive driving classes. Anything that you're worried about being in their lives, get them the skills they need to survive it. Number 12. One thing that freaks me out is when my adult son goes ice fishing. My worst fear ever is that he breaks through and can't make it back to the opening and pull himself out. This visual plays itself over and over in my head when I know he's out, and until I know he's home safe. What can I do? And that's kind of tied into the one before that. That's kind of tied into question 11, where we've got an adult child going out engaging in a risky behavior, a hobby that he loves, that brings him joy, but we're afraid it's going to get them hurt. And the thing is, our kids are always our kids. There are kids when they're infants, there are kids when they're in elementary school, there are kids when they're teenagers and trying really hard to get us to strangle them. And there are kids when they're a 20-year-old, 28-year-old Navy SEAL. They're still our kids. And so this question's about adult children and the risks they take, especially if it's risky behavior. And that could be really bad risky behavior like using drugs, getting addicted to gambling, sex addiction, anything like that. Or it could be things like your kid just really likes rock climbing, or he's a full contact karate fighter. These are still risky things and they make us worry. And most of what I said for the last question applies here. Teach them to pay attention to the big dangers, but not with the small dangers. Make sure they have the skills to engage in their activities safely. If your child likes rock climbing, their Christmas present could be a mountaineering survival course. Get them the skills they need to do this hobby as well and as safely as possible. And then finally, if they have a risky hobby, have them take you. Go out rock climbing with your kid. Come to their karate tournament. Go wilderness backpacking with them so you can see them being safe. This isn't as much about keeping them safe, because if they're going to be safe, they will be safe, and you've helped them develop the skills and honor their instincts and all of those things we talked about. But it also just getting out there and seeing them be competent and excellent at this thing will help you relax and rest assured that they are being safe in their hobbies, because you've raised them to be safe, competent people who enjoy life. Number 13, how can I protect my kids from bullies when I'm not there with them? And I get this from Dave Kovar, among others. Dave Kovar's episode aired just last week, in fact, about how to stop bullying both at home and at school. And the first thing is you want to get them trained. There's lots of products out there and lots of different ways to get trained in dealing with bullies. Mr. Kovar has one that's online, and I think it's for free, but there's many, many, many other products. We need to abandon what we used to pretend works and build on what we know works to stop bullies. And that requires training, just like any other kind of self-defense situation. It's not enough to acknowledge that a fire plan is necessary. It's not enough to buy a gun and put it in a safe. You need to acknowledge the problem, find the solution, then train with that solution until you can do it under stress. And getting your child that kind of training is how we help them stay safe from bullies. Now, the other thing that you absolutely need to do, no matter what kind of training they get, is we need to tell our kids that they have permission to keep themselves safe. A lot of schools have a zero tolerance policy, and the science is not friendly to it, and our experience is not friendly to it. Zero tolerance exists to protect schools from lawsuits, not to protect your kid from bullies. And so you need to give your kids the skills to defend themselves, and then also the permission to defend themselves. That what happens at school is going to happen at school, and there's not much you can do about that, but they will not be in extra trouble at home if it was a legitimate case of self-defense. And once they have those skills and that permission, the strangest thing happens. The bullies usually leave them alone because they can tell from just your kid's demeanor and the way they walk and the way they respond to initial attempts at bullying that this is not somebody who's going to be fun to bully. This is not going to work out the way they wanted. So to prevent bullying by getting your kids the skills and giving them the permission to deal with bullies effectively. Number 14, how can I get my child to wear a helmet when biking, skating, scootering, etc.? And this is a big one. Helmets are proven to seriously minimize and prevent injuries in those kinds of accidents. And the best way to do it is lead by example. Our kids will imitate what we do, especially if it's something we just kind of do without calling attention to it. So every time we go for a bike ride with our kids, we put on a helmet. Every time we go get on a bike to train for a triathlon or ride a scooter or ride an ATV or get on any kind of vehicle when we're on vacation, we put on a helmet. We insist that our kids put on helmets. And that's the first stage. Just show them you wearing a helmet. And then second is, if you find out they're not wearing a helmet, end the world. Be as permissive as possible about things that can be negotiable. But if you've led by example and made the expectations known and they aren't wearing a helmet, then yes, they do lose that vehicle and that privilege for a period of time. And be very, very consistent and very strict about this, because the worst case scenario of being too strict about helmet wearing is so much better than the worst case scenario of not being strict enough. Number 15, how to deal with school authorities who won't help if my child is being bullied. Now, this is a big one, and I know a lot of parents from when I was running a karate school and dealing with kids and their parents every day, and my own experience in the schools with my kids. This can be extremely frustrating, and it just makes you want to scream. Unfortunately, screaming doesn't help a whole lot. Now, from George Brick, who was a Marine, he was in forced recon, and then he ended up in school teaching in administration, so he has a kind of unique perspective about school and school safety. One thing he brought up is that the principal knows who the problem kids are. So if you come in and with your kid and tell them that little Johnny is being a bully, he's going to respond in one of two ways. One of them is he's going to seem surprised. And if that happens, then your child may not actually be being bullied. There may be something going on interpersonally between your kid and this kid. And it could resemble bullying, but it could be a personal issue that needs to be dealt with, but dealt with in different ways. On the other hand, if the principal looks completely unsurprised, then you know you're dealing with bullying. And you can move forward with the best solutions. Now, if your child is being bullied and the administration is not doing anything or not doing enough to keep your child safe, the solution is to remember that this is all about convenience. And I don't mean to say that teachers are lazy. They are one of the professions that is pulled in too many directions all at once. They rarely have time to do anything they do right. It's a miracle that they get as much done as they do. But if all of that pressure, all of that time famine for them means that they can't take the time to keep your child safe, our job is to make not keeping our kids safe far more inconvenient than the process by which they would keep our child safe. And that means making phone calls, that means standing politely and talking to them, that means being present, if that means going up the food chain to the principal, to the school board, to the superintendent, all these are available to us. But when you're coming into a situation where the administration or the teachers are not keeping your child safe and not responding to polite requests, again, we don't scream, we don't yell, but we just politely, implacably make not keeping your kids safe far less convenient than keeping your kids safe. Question number 16. What's the one thing you wish was on this list? Now I'm not even sure how to phrase this one as a question, but there's a trick that I learned early on in my child safety journey that I want to share with you. And it's that it was taught to me in terms of being out traveling abroad with our children, but really we could apply this to any time we go out from our home. And just before we go, take a quick family photo or an individual photo of each of our children, so that if we lose track of our child, whether that's because they wander off or because there's something worse going on, instead of trying to explain to somebody, and in the case that this was brought to my attention in a foreign language in a different country, trying to explain what our child looks like, try to remember what they were wearing, that's a really daunting task, almost impossible under the kind of stress that you would be in when looking for a lost child. Instead, you can just show a picture. And you can text that picture to the security guards, to the local police, to anybody, and communicate all of that complex information instantaneously to everybody who needs to know it. This is one of the best tricks I ever learned, and I wanted to make sure it was on this list. So before you go out into the world, take a picture of your kids so you have an updated photo of exactly how they look, what their hair is like, how much, what their physique is like on that particular week, what they're wearing that day. All of that information right there communicated far faster than you could tell somebody, even if you were in your right mind. Number 17. I'm really scared when driving over bridges and beside rivers. What can I do about this? This was actually happened with my mom. Now, there's a little, but I spent most of my young life just phobically afraid of drowning. And I found out later that my mother used to have almost panic attacks when we would drive next to this river that was on the route between my mom's house and her parents' house. And she was terrified of going over into the river and trying to save herself and, at that time, her two sons, both of whom were under 5 years old. And that's what we're scared of when we're in that situation. We're afraid of what would happen if the car was in the water and we would be responsible to pull ourselves and our kids out of the car and to safety. And like so many other things that we're scared of, when you find a specific thing you're afraid of, go learn the skills. In this case, get the tools necessary to escape from a car that's underwater. Keep them handy and somewhere in the car you can reach. Take a driving course, a defensive driving course or a safe driving course. Take a swimming and life rescue course. Escape and evasion courses for driving and for being in the water in a car. These classes exist. Find one and take one. If you're really, really worried about it, make sure there's a life jacket in the car. Get whatever skills and equipment you require to feel competent and ready for that situation, that worst case scenario that's worrying you the most. Number 18. Do you have a grab and go file of your important papers handy in case you have to leave quickly for an emergency? And I think a lot of us became aware of that this year when we had that double whammy of wildfires and hurricanes putting what felt like 3/4 of the country in a natural disaster all at once. Go bags aren't just for your weird prepper cousin anymore. It's a good idea to have some basic survival equipment and some basic life equipment in an easy place where you can just grab it and get out of the house if you have to. Now, we have an upcoming episode about what should go into a full-on go bag, but one of those things should be a sheaf of photocopies of your birth certificate, insurance documents, will, driver's license, credit cards, Any of those things where for a couple of weeks in your life you might want to access them, especially in a situation where there's been a bit of a breakdown. So just getting those papers together, making some photocopies, put them in a Ziploc bag, put that Ziploc bag in your go bag, or you could put it all into a fireproof case, or a fireproof safe rather, and take that and make sure that getting that is part of the evacuation plan that you've already made and already practiced, so you don't end up in the car 20 minutes away, unable to go back, and think, oh, damn it, I forgot the safe. So yes, you should have that grab and go file, and it should be in your go bag with the other essentials. Number 19, my child has special needs. What are the unique safety concerns I should be aware of? Now, unfortunately, this is too general for me to give detailed advice. The advice is different for somebody who's got bipolar disorder as opposed to a third grader with Down syndrome, and both of those differ from an ADHD individual of whatever age. So I can't really give you specific details. I'm not qualified to do so. And even if I was qualified to give advice for every possible special need, that would be not just a video of itself, but an entire channel of its own. So I can't give you specific advice about any given special need, but I can give you some general information. And that is, whatever your child's situation, whatever your situation, there's an expert. And there's an organization, and there's a dozen internet forums, and there's a local support group. You are not alone in this. After awareness, community is the world's best form of self-defense. Find your community of adults who love their children, who have special needs, and have dealt with the safety issues and the bureaucratic issues and the emotional issues that you're dealing with now. One thing to remember is that sensei, which I'm sure most of our viewers know is the Japanese word for a karate teacher, literally translates to somebody who has walked this road before. So find your sensei, the person who has dealt with what you're dealing with, and learn from them what worked, what didn't work, and what they would do differently. That community is out there. One of the great things about the internet and the current size of the human population is you are not alone. I can guarantee you, you are not alone, and you can find people who can help you with this specific thing. Number 21, how can my child resist an abduction attack? Number 21, how can my child resist an abduction attempt? Now this is a serious situation, because our kid can be a 7-year-old Taekwondo brown belt, but when you still weigh 110 pounds, you're not going to be able to fight off an adult. And I think a lot of parents worry about that in terms of abduction. But we deal with an abduction attempt the same way we would do any other self-defense situation. Although with our child resisting abduction, we keep in mind the realities of that physical differential. And think of it in stages. We teach our child to be aware. Teach them some of those self-awareness drills that we've talked about in other episodes. Make sure that they are paying attention for anything funny on the way home from school, on the way to school, at the playground, at the park. Teach them a bias towards action, that it is always better to act, to move, to go to an adult you trust, than to wait to see what's happening. Teach them to scream first and apologize later, that if there's an adult that is making them uncomfortable, to make a lot of noise and get the heck out of there, make a big commotion. And if they're wrong, it's a little bit embarrassing. It's way better than being wrong and not acting. And then finally, there are some specific techniques, and I'll go into those in some videos later on. But two of the best ones are what we call the koala hug, where you grab a stationary or heavy object and wrap your arms and legs around it while screaming your head off, making it very difficult. Usually, even a small child can buy many minutes of noise and time and space, because while the bad guy is prying off their legs, they're grabbing their arms, and when the arms come loose, they grab with their legs. Anybody who's tried to pick up a screaming, tantrum-throwing 3-year-old knows how hard a child can make it to pick them up. And we basically weaponize that for this technique. And we'll go into that in more detail in other videos. But again, teach your child to be aware, teach them to have a bias towards action, teach them to scream first and apologize later, and work a few basic techniques. Number 22. I once took a shower, went to the store, and got home to realize my 1-year-old was in the living room alone the whole time. I have ADHD. How do I prevent that from ever happening again? And wow, that's scary and a little bit extreme, but I think every parent has a story, ADHD or not, of that time they were forgetful or sleepy or made some mistake somewhere along the line, and your child's alive now, but could have gone a different way. I think we all have that story. And it reminds me a lot of the situation that happens every summer about parents leaving kids in their hot cars. And there's deaths every summer about that, and they're tragic and they're terrible. And we like to think about that as being the aegis of ignorant, negligent people or flighty Karens going to the supermarket and chatting away and gossiping with other flighty people. But that's not really how it happens. The overwhelming majority of those children left in the car happen when the parent who normally doesn't take the kid to daycare is on tap to take the kid to daycare, and just in that morning autopilot forgets and goes to work and then realizes a couple hours later that they had forgotten to take their kid to daycare, and by then it's too late. And that's awful. And I bring that up in the case of this because that forgetfulness, that blind spot, whether you have ADHD or you're dealing with another sensory issue or whether you don't, and just life causes problems. Tools are the answer here. If you don't have a personal attribute that you feel you need to keep your child safe, develop a tool, and that can be a physical object or it can be a system. In the example of leaving your child in the car, they say to, when you put your car in the car seat in that morning, you chuck your cell phone back there. Even if your normal routine means that you forget momentarily that your child's there, you will go get your phone or your briefcase or whatever. And a lot of people try to make a big deal out of, well, put something important in the back seat is the basic advice here. And then, well, isn't your child important? It's not about what's important. It's about what is part of your routine. What's going to disrupt your routine the most so you remember this thing that is different in this day. So you develop that tool. I have a bit of ADHD myself, and I remember years ago when I proposed to a girl, I put Post-it notes on the door, the doorknob, and my steering wheel on the day I was going to get down on one knee to remind myself not to forget the ring. So set yourself up. Maybe put a Post-it note on the door about baby or one on the bathroom mirror. Find ways in your life to put little reminders, the little string on the finger trick. And that's how you navigate this kind of thing. It's really scary, but you're not alone. And just find the tools to replace the attributes that you feel you don't have. Number 23. Do you recommend that I carry my keys and mace when walking home at night? Yes and no. Yes, if walking home at night in a situation where you feel you might be in danger is something you can't avoid. Yes, if you are comfortable with using mace as a self-defense weapon and have taken some training and practice with mace so that the first time you try to use it isn't the time that you are using it under stress and under attack. The number of people who accidentally hold the mace canister the wrong way and press the thing and then zap themselves in the face is embarrassingly high. So, should you carry a weapon when walking home at night? Whether that's mace or something else, yes, if you are willing to deal with the emotional consequences of doing that to another person, and you are willing to get the training and practice needed to use it effectively. And then, of course, the other part of that is the better plan. If you feel threatened in a situation, change the situation. Can you walk home in a different route that's safer? Can you change the time you walk home so that you're walking with somebody? Can you arrange to meet a friend? Being ready for combat is important in situations that could create violence, but it's even better to avoid it entirely. Number 24, how do I prevent my child from choking? This is one we got from Justin Schorr, that paramedic who was our interview for our very first episode. Now, remember, their throat's about this diameter when they're a child, when they're an infant, toddler around that size, when they're ready to eat solid food. It's about that big, so make sure nothing bigger than this goes in their mouth. And there's some surprising foods, like grapes, you're going to have to cut. Some berries you'll have to cut. But make sure that when they are eating, that then nothing larger than that goes in their mouth. Pay attention also, we found out, to any food, the empty starch foods like your goldfish, like your crackers, like your Cheerios, because that can create a paste that blocks the throat. So limit the amount of that coming in at any given time. And then once they reach the age of reason where they're feeding themselves, again, it's about modeling, it's about living by example. We should model mindful eating, slow eating, and attentive eating, rather than wolfing down the food real fast while rushing off to the game or whatever. Because if we model that at the table, that's how our children will eat. And then, of course, also get the skill, know how to do the Heimlich, and know the differences between Heimlich on a toddler and Heimlich on an adult, so that if they choke, you can be there and save the day. Number 25. Walking outdoors in uncrowded places is a mental health and physical health need for me. But as a woman, especially in the winter months when things are dark early, what's a good way to stay safe? I can't use the buddy system anymore because of COVID. Okay, that's a good question, kind of related to the one we did 2 questions ago, but there's more information that I think everybody needs. Now, first of all, even when it isn't COVID season rather, there are times you can't use the buddy system. So here's what I've got. And the first thing is that I talked with Dawn Armstrong and Rebecca Knight. Now, these are 2 very skilled, very knowledgeable female martial arts practitioners. And I wanted to talk to them because their reality in this situation is different from my 200-pound male high school jock martial artist reality. So what I would do to keep myself safe isn't what a woman walking alone would necessarily do to keep herself safe. I just don't understand the realities. And what they said was that your first line of defense when walking alone is your body language and your demeanor. Walk with confidence, walk in a straight line, walk where you know what you're doing. And the second line of defense is your awareness, both in terms of know what's going on around you, know where the places are that somebody might come out, know what's normal behavior for that block. And if you see something different from normal behavior, if you see a potential problem, change your route, change your demeanor, do what you can to avoid the problem. And then if it does come to somebody approaching you, early and often, be loud, be aggressive, give yourself permission to be rude. And then finally, if they don't back off, have some self-defense skills. Know that in a situation as a woman that you're going to want to rely less on brute strength and more on leverage and focus and timing and accuracy. Hit the eyes, hit the throat, hit the knee, hit the groin as a secondary target. But we talk about that a lot in my interview with Rebecca and also my interview with Dawn. And there are classes you can take. But having that same framework of personal awareness, situational awareness, bias towards action, willingness to yell, much like we talked about with teaching our kids. Number 26, what's the best way to keep our kids off drugs? Wow, so we've been asking that question for decades, and I don't think anybody's found the answer. And I'm going to make myself a little unpopular with some crowds with what I'm going to say next. And that is, you can't keep your kids off drugs. The culture around drugs in America and in most of the world is of experimentation. Our kids are going to do dumb, risky things in their teens and their early 20s. And so we can't keep them from using drugs. What we want to do is keep them from becoming addicted to drugs or from using drugs in situations that double up on the danger. We can help them navigate that stage in their lives when they're almost certainly experimenting with drugs. And if they don't, they're absolutely experimenting with some other kind of risky behavior. And we want to help them navigate those times in ways that keep them from getting addicted or ending up in jail or ending up getting hurt. And the best way to do that is to communicate with them openly throughout their lives, give them unconditional love, lead by example, so that they are confident kids who are not looking to self-medicate because of emotional issues they've got that they don't feel like they can talk to you about, so that they watch you making intelligent decisions about alcohol or legal drugs if the drugs are more legal in where you are nowadays. So they see you being responsible with those behaviors, see you being responsible with other kinds of risky behaviors. If you have a risky hobby, or you're driving, or any other kind of thing that could result in injury. And the example we set is the example that they will follow for the most part. And of course, if you do see your child developing a habit with drugs or any other kind of addictive activity or substance, being there again with that unconditional love and that attitude that you and your child are going to solve this problem together, rather than falling into that blame that often comes from the fear that we feel if we see our child in danger. Number 27. If my kids get separated or lost at the store, what should they do? Now, I want to take a moment about if they get lost at the store, should be the same plan as if they get lost at the playground, if they get lost at the amusement park, if they get lost at the regular park, if they get lost in a parking lot. Whatever the circumstances of your child getting lost, in those first moments, the plan should be the same for them. They need to stay put, they need to make noise, and they need to ask for help. And that just means as soon as they realize they're lost, they do not move from that spot unless they're in physical danger. They make noise, they call for you, they call your name as loudly as they can. And then they ask for help. They find an adult who looks like an adult who would be helpful, and they engage that adult in getting help finding you. If possible, they should all still stay put and have that adult go out and find you while they remain in place, if it's safe, and if they can convince the adult to do it that way. And that should be your plan regardless of where or how they get lost. Number 28. How can my kids stay safe on the school bus? Now, there's two kinds of safe that we're dealing with here. There's traffic safe and there's social safe, meaning that safety from car accidents or in a car accident involving the bus. And then the social safe is that dealing with bullies, peer pressure, and other shenanigans that go on school buses nationwide. In terms of traffic safety, encourage your child to sit facing forward with their back against the chair, not do things that distract the driver, and to tell you if the driver acts sketchy in any way or they feel the driver is not driving safely. Those are the best things they can do to keep themselves safe about traffic situations on the bus. Now, while we're on that topic, also make sure that they remember that crossing the road getting out of the school bus is one of the most dangerous times. There's laws about it, and people generally try to drive safe, but remember that school buses block visibility, and the number of children who get hit by a car crossing the street after getting off the bus each year is disturbingly high. So make sure that you talk to them about that part of it as well as how to stay safe while on the bus. Now, in terms of social safety on the bus, just sit closer to the front. Encourage your child, even though it's not where the cool kids sit, that if they're having some kind of social problem on the bus, to sit closer to the person in charge. And of course, pair that with the other anti-bully skills that you've taught your child for dealing with bullies in any situation. A final thing you can do is, and this is a losing battle, but lobby with your school district is put some damn seatbelts in the bus. I don't know anybody who's been successful in this, but if we make more noise and more of us make noise, maybe it'll change. It's kind of ridiculous that there aren't seatbelts on the bus. Number 29. If my kids get separated or lost from me, what should I do? Kind of a follow-up on the question before about what your child should do if they get lost. And what we do is, again, simple, one-plan response to however you ended up with not knowing where your child is. And there's 3 basic steps. Number 1, get down on one knee and call for them. You get down on one knee because that's where their ears are. They are more likely to hear you if you get down on one knee to their height than if you're yelling from up top. Step 2, retrace your steps rapidly to where you last saw them. And then step 3, get all the help you can as fast as you can. Just once you get back to where you last saw them, if you haven't found them then, grab everybody you can, employees, strangers, anybody within a shouting distance, and give them specific instructions. Remember that if you say, somebody help me, very few people will help you. Instead, they'll go ahead and assume that somebody else is helping you. But if you say, you in the red shirt, could you walk that way looking for a child in a purple sweater? Oh, and show them that photo from when we talked earlier. They look like this. You, sir, manager, could you get on the PA system and give it individual specific instructions to help you find your child. And it's those 3 steps every time. Get down on one knee and call, then retrace your steps to where you last saw them, and then get as much help as you can, as fast as you can. That's going to work if your child just simply got lost, and that's going to be the best hope you have if your child was in fact taken by someone trying to abduct them. Number 30, guarding for the unguarded moment. The one thing I couldn't prepare them for or protect them from. I know this is vague, but it's the thing I don't know about that worries me most. And I think that resonates with me, and I think it resonates a lot with you, that what's that safety and concern that we haven't thought of? It's one of the reasons I created this channel, so I could talk to experts who knew more about what can go wrong and about what threats are out there. Now, the best solution to this is to create some simple, universal steps and plans. You can't prep for anything. You can't prep for everything, rather. But you can build independence, competence, and confidence both for yourself and for your child by coming up with a kind of general plan for if you're in a car accident, what are the steps to get out of it safely? If you feel you're being followed, what are the steps? And to create basic plans and to practice those plans and to talk about those and have what-if conversations from time to time, so your child doesn't just practice a rote response to a single situation, but a general set of guidelines that they can expand on in their own and improvise when they need to. And again, it's about awareness, it's about confidence, it's about bias towards action, and it's about building a child who trusts you to keep them safe, and then later trust themselves to be competent enough to take action and save themselves. Number 31. What are the most important elements of a family safety plan? First of all, you need 2 plans. You don't need 10 plans. You don't need that binder that's at work where you have a page each for one for hurricanes, one for tornadoes, one for a fire, one for a chemical spill, one for an active shooter situation, one for if the microwave explodes, and they have just a different page with very finely differentiated plans for a bunch of different stuff. And that was written by the lawyers so that they can avoid being sued. And forget that model. As a family, we need 2 plans, a bug out plan and a bug in plan. The bug out plan is for when you are in a place and you need to get out of that place. And a bug in plan is for when there is a threat that you need to respond to by getting together and then making another plan, usually, again, getting away together or sheltering in place together. You need 2 plans, bug in and bug out. And in those plans, the same elements are necessary. First of all, everybody has to have a role and understand that role. Second, you have to account for tools you need for safety and for obstacles that might be in your path. For example, when building a bug-out plan for fire. So let me rephrase that. When building your bug-out plan that includes responding to fire, everybody who's old enough should know how to use a fire extinguisher. And you should have a plan for dealing with the bars on your child's window. So dealing with tools and obstacles relevant to the plan. And the third thing is you need a set rally point. For a bug-in plan, it's a room in the house. For the bug-out plan, it's a safe space near the house. And then if you're out in the world together, you might make a small bug-in plan or bug-out plan for if you're at a carnival, that you're all going to meet by the Ferris wheel because it's the one thing that everybody can see from everywhere in the park. But your plan's key elements are everybody having a role, dealing with tools and most common obstacles, and a rally point. Number 32. How do I protect a child from a broken heart? Well, you can't. And honestly, we don't want to. We hate to see our child hurt. We hate to see our child sad. But a broken heart is part of life. And if we really raise a child who never has a broken heart, we've raised a child who is not courageous enough to fall in love. And we don't want that. Now that said, you can sort of raise a child to not have a broken heart. We can raise resilient children who will be hurt in romantic relationships, who will go out and risk things and suffer setbacks and suffer discouragement and suffer from sadness. but who are resilient enough to take that suffering and turn it into personal growth. Now, I'm not going to be able to answer the question about how to do that in a 3-minute snippet in this longer video, but there are experts, and we can educate ourselves on the best way to do that, on how to provide that unconditional love, how to model that response to setback, how to raise children who are resilient, so even when their heart is broken, it doesn't break who they are. Number 33, what is the most significant sign that my child might be in danger from an adult? And that was pretty simple. Look for changes in their behavior. This was one of the through lines from so many of my interviews about communicating with our kids, about keeping them safe from strangers, about keeping them safe at school, about looking for signs of danger of suicide. We look for the changes in their behavior. Every kid's different. Every kid's behavior is different. The example that was used in one of my early interviews is if your kid starts getting into death metal and is singing about killing and dying all the time, wearing black, going to those concerts, coming back and seeming kind of off like a bad sitcom stereotype, that in and of itself doesn't mean anything. But if that same child stops listening to their music, stops going to concerts, stops deriving joy from this, that's a sign of trouble. So paying attention and looking for changed behavior is the best early significant warning sign that there may be something going on with an adult in their lives. Number 34, what are the most important aspects of pedestrian safety? And really, I learned this when I was living in Malaysia with my boys a few years back. Malaysian traffic is insane. The lanes are guidelines, it is crowded, it is loud, there are motorcycles zipping in and out, there's livestock. It is a mosh pit. But the way you cross it is very simple. You see and you be seen. You pay attention, you look around, you notice where everything is, how fast they're going, what direction they're going, and then you make sure people see you, and you walk with confidence in a line so they can predict where you're going. As long as you are visible and predictable and paying attention, you should be safe in most pedestrian situations. While you're at this, know where the danger zones are. Now, crosswalks are kind of the opposite of that, where in most Western countries, a crosswalk is where the cars expect to see pedestrians. So they are the opposite of a danger zone, whereas the street in between crosswalks is a danger zone. Knowing which intersections are rough, where there's a blind corner, where there's a van parked in a way that obscures lines of sight, and paying attention to those and then making that plan of being seen take those into account. So see, be seen, know the danger zones. Those are the most important aspects of pedestrian safety. Number 35. How do you suggest someone approach their spouse about getting self-defense training if the spouse is not as concerned about safety as you are? Now, this is an example of something I've talked about on the show a couple of times about the difference between influence and authority. With our kids, as they become teenagers and young adults, our authority over them fades, and we just hope that we've raised them in a way that makes them value our opinion and value our knowledge and respect and respond to our influence. Now, and of course, this is the only thing you've got when you are disagreeing with your spouse. And the answer to how to deal with that is going to be different from spouse to spouse. Your spouse's objections to learning self-defense might be different from my spouse's objections to learning self-defense, and both of those will have different reasons than our buddy's spouse. And so what we need to do is approach it like we do any other disagreement where you fundamentally have different views on something that one of you considers non-negotiable, or both of you consider non-negotiable. And here we go with listening actively, communicating our needs, living by example. So showing by your engagement around self-defense topics how that makes your life better. Finding out what the core objection to getting self-defense training is and finding out if there's a way that you can work around it. Our interview with Alex Bromley with Verbal Judo teaches a number of techniques about getting what you need from somebody who doesn't necessarily want to do it. And then find the thing. what is the thing that would convince them otherwise? What is the aspect of self-defense training that your spouse, who presumably you know pretty well, would get excited about? For example, my lovely and talented wife Rachel is not a martial arts person, but she liked how capoeira looks. So once COVID goes away, we're probably going to go get some capoeira lessons. So find the thing about martial arts, about self-defense that would engage the things they love and the things they're interested in, and see if you can find a route through that way. That one's a tough one, and I don't think there are guaranteed or easy answers, but that's what I can think of to help with that situation. Good luck. Number 36. How do I encourage my kid to have friends who aren't toxic? Once again, lead by example. Show them how friends treat their friends by having them see how you treat the people in your life and how those friends treat you. Show them how partners teach their partners by having them see you disagree with your romantic partner in a way that isn't toxic and harmful. Lead by example. And of course, build confidence. Show them how boundaries work and give them permission to defend themselves verbally or physically. Your kid's peer group is going to be one of the biggest potential threats to their success and happiness, and one of the things that you can do very little about once they're in that peer group. So our best defense is to show them early how people who love each other and care about each other are supposed to treat one another. So that when they end up in a relationship or a friendship where that person is treating them poorly, they can recognize it and know to walk away. Number 37. What are the basics of sleeping safety? Number 37. What are the basics of sleeping safety for infants? Sudden infant death syndrome and suffocating are two serious issues for those first little babies. I don't know anybody who's had an infant who didn't spend a large part of that first year just every once in a while checking to make sure they're still breathing. And there are some best practices that we know. And some of the most important are use a firm mattress that they're not going to sink into, so that their face doesn't sink into the soft mattress and cover their mouth and nose. Make sure the mattress fits tightly in the crib so there isn't room for them to slip into between the mattress and the bars. Keep the crib bare of blankies and stuffed toys until they're at least a year old. They should sleep with nothing but themselves for that first year. Make sure they're wearing warm enough pajamas, but keep it clear while they are sleeping. Check the crib for recalls and safety standards using the Consumer Product Safety Commission and recall.gov to make sure that nobody accidentally installed a bear trap or something during manufacturing. I joke, but this is very serious. A lot of cribs have small safety issues that could do everything from snap off a finger to choke your child to death. So check those recalls. Always put them to sleep on their back. Sleeping on the back is safer than sleeping on the front. Some babies will flip over, but one of the nice things is if they can flip over from their back to their front, they can flip back over from their front to their back. If you put them sleeping on their back every time, by the time they're able to physically go ahead and turn over onto their face, they're usually safer from that kind of suffocation risk. And finally, there's a little bit of controversy, but co-sleeping is generally seen as an issue. I know it's nice to want to fall asleep with your baby, but your mattress is soft enough that it could smother them. There have been cases of adults rolling over and pinning or damaging their child. Most of those situations, as the research has come out, have been where the adult was inebriated or just too exhausted. But it's a high enough risk that most people recommend that when it's time for baby to go to sleep, they're either sleeping here, cradled in the arms of an awake adult, or they're in their crib or stroller or something like that. Number 38. Mental safety is also important. How do you get your kids to share and talk about their feelings? Anybody who's raised a teenager knows that this is hard. Anybody who's raised a tween knows that this is hard. Anybody who was a teenager knows that this is really hard. But that doesn't mean it's impossible. And the big thing is to be strategic and tactical about building these lines of communication from very early on. Create rituals of conversation, like when you're walking or driving to a restaurant together, at the dinner table, when you're playing a board game. I know that growing up, my dad and I had our best talks when we were playing chess or Risk or Axis and Allies. Go shoot some hoop and pass the time of day with your child from when they're very young, so that talking to you really about their emotions and what's going on with their lives is just what they do. And then while you're having those conversations, listen to what they have to say, even when they're telling you about their seventh favorite dinosaur. Listen and ask open questions to encourage them to communicate to you and tell you what's going on with them and what they're passionate about and what they're interested in. Third thing is, don't freak out. Your kids are going to tell you things that scare you, that anger you, that annoy you, that frustrate you. And just discipline ourselves not to freak out when our kids bring that information, so that when they do bring something that needs to be dealt with, the two of you can go solve it together, and they can come to you with that, with the expectation and assumption that you're not going to tear them apart, but you're going to solve the problem. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't expect real, meaningful, natural consequences to bad behavior, but they also know that you're not going to put the boot in on them, that you're not going to punish them unfairly, that they're never, ever, ever going to lose your love or respect by bringing information to you. And then finally, honor their feelings. When they talk about things that are important to them, listen and show them that it's important to you because it's important to them. And that gets back to that seventh favorite dinosaur, that umpteenth conversation about their favorite thing going on in Minecraft or whatever. If we show them that we will care about their feelings about those things, then they will trust us to care about their feelings about the bigger, more important things. And all of these techniques are things that we want to practice early when they're kids and we're still their heroes, so that when they're teens and young adults, they're in the habit of bringing things to our attention, and they trust us to receive that information in a way that's productive and loving. Number 39, what should I teach my kids about house fires? So George Brick, in our interview with him, said that a plan you don't rehearse is not a plan. And you should teach and train and practice a fire escape plan with your child. And everybody should have a role that's age appropriate. For most kids, it's get out of bed, get out the window. If you live on the second floor, know how to deploy the fire ladder. If you live on the first floor, tuck and roll, and then get to a rally point somewhere in the neighborhood that they already know about. Now, as they get older, you can teach them how to use the fire safety tools, like your fire extinguishers, but emphasize that their job is to follow the escape plan and meet you at the rally point, so that you can do your job knowing that they did theirs. Make sure that they know that you can't leave the house in a fire if you don't know that they are leaving the house. And show them how to leave the house and practice leaving the house at least once a year, so that that plan is in place. And you know that if it happens, everybody's going to execute the plan. Number 40, I'm really worried about quicksand. How do I prepare my kids for this ever-present danger? So, I'm pretty sure this person was joking, but it brings up a point that there are specific natural hazards, specific location hazards whenever we go somewhere. You know the hazards in your hometown. You know that when that first winter freeze comes, there's that corner that often accumulates a little bit of ice, and so there's probably going to be a traction problem there. You know about the river that has a nasty current. You know about the natural hazards in your area. When you go visit somewhere else, when you go travel, it's a good idea to use the resources at your disposal to find out what the hazards are there. It might be quicksand, it might be monitor lizards, it might be any other kind of poisonous animal, it might be a tree, it might be palm trees that drop coconuts on people's heads. Research those hazards and find out how to keep yourself safe from them. It's a good habit to be in when preparing to go anywhere. Now, for quicksand in particular, the way you stay safe is you bring a hat and water and a signaling device. As it turns out, you don't drown in quicksand. You reach a point of equilibrium where you just kind of are neutrally buoyant in quicksand, and that point for almost everybody is well below their head. It's usually here in the chest. But people do die of exposure if they're trapped in quicksand. So you bring water, you wear a hat, and you bring a signaling device so you can stay hydrated and sheltered from the sun while you wait for help to arrive. Number 41. What is the line between security and freedom? It seems the safer we try to make the world, the more freedoms we lose. Can we have enough personal safety so we don't need state regulation? So, I'm not going to touch the political aspects of this with a 10-foot pole. Everybody's got their own opinions, and you're welcome to them. You earned them, I earned mine. But what is real in there is that balance, especially with teens, about keeping our children safe and letting them learn to be safe on their own. Because we don't want to just let them go fly and figure it out and learn by braille, by bumping into things and getting hurt and going to jail or getting addicted to drugs. But at the same time, we don't want to keep them so safe that they never learn to avoid dangerous situations in general. They will eventually have to go out in the world and be responsible for themselves. So everybody's going to have their own tipping point. It's a little bit like that old George Carlin sketch about no matter how fast you drive, whether it's 20 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour, everybody who's driving slower is an idiot, everybody who's driving faster is a maniac. And so you're going to find your own place that you are most comfortable. And then with that tipping point, approach that strategically for each thing you're worried about and with kind of a staged entry. For example, when you're going shopping or going on an outing with your kids, when they're young, you're going to want them to hold your hand and be right there with you. And then as they get older, teach them to not hold your hand, but stay within a very close orbit, stay within reach. And then as they're a little older, teach them to stay safe while they're within visual range of you, but they don't have to be within grabbing range. And then let them go further and further and spend more time outside of your sight and more time outside of your sight, all the time teaching them the safety skills necessary for dealing with that new set of responsibilities and freedoms until they're at a point where they can go off to college without you worrying all the time. For example, another example is alcohol. In our home, from the very earliest, my kids can have a sip of alcohol that I'm drinking if they're curious. And then as they got older and older and older, their access to alcohol got larger and larger, more on a European model than the American model. So that when they were adults on their own, they already had an adult relationship with alcohol. So there was never any of that temptation to go binge drinking and put themselves at serious risk. And you can come out with lots and lots of other examples. A final example I'll use is both of my sons, which is all of my kids, they know how to change an electrical outlet. And what we did was we sat down and I had them watch me change a couple of outlets. And then I had them talk me through changing the outlets, giving me the instructions. And then I had them change the outlet while I was giving them the instructions. And then I had them change the outlet with me just nearby. So that by the end of that staged process, they had done it, seen it done right, they had done it accurately under supervision, and then they had done it correctly without much supervision. So all that to say, give them more freedom and more freedom progressively over time, while with each new iteration of freedom, you're showing them how to stay safe within these new boundaries. Number 42, how many smoke alarms do I need? So the current thinking is one for every bedroom and then one for each floor in a common area. And that they should always be at the highest point in that room, so they are the first place the smoke goes. Now, while we're talking about fire alarms, definitely change the batteries at spring forward and fall back days twice a year. Better safe than sorry. Also, have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen, preferably one in the master bedroom. And if you do work in your garage, one in your garage as well. You should also have a carbon monoxide detector in the house. And then there are some places where you might need a detector for a local hazard as well. Out here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of people recommend a radon detector if you have a basement because radon gas tends to accumulate when you get below grade.
Question number 43. What safety issues should I look for at playgrounds? Now, we've already talked about abduction, so let's look specifically at safety concerns that could lead to an injury with your child. And what you want to do is run through a quick checklist on the playground for various warning signs. And the first of those warning signs is broken elements. If you see a break in a swing or on a slide or on a pole or something, that in itself is dangerous, of course, but it also indicates that the playground is not being well maintained. And there could be other problems that you can't see. So if you see broken elements on a playground, it's probably a good idea to go find another playground. After that, look for the safety rails on the higher elements. Make sure that they are tall enough to protect your child. Some of them are made for smaller children and only hit an older one at the waist, which is below the center of gravity, and they can go right over. While you're at it, look at the maximum height. How high up above the ground can a child get? Not just on the places they're supposed to play, but on roofs or anything else that they can climb up onto to get a good idea of how far they might fall. After that, look at the ground material. Also on the subject of falling, right? And do we have those new high-tech rubber mats? Is it sawdust? Is it a pile of little pieces of tire? Is it just asphalt? Then finally, take a look at just the age appropriateness of the toys. Is it built for kids who are the age of your children, or are they made for kids who are older than that or younger than that? Doesn't necessarily make a deal breaker one way or the other, but it does help you assess how safe it will be, how closely your children need to be supervised. Once you've looked at the playground equipment, then do a quick look for lines of sight from where you plan to sit. Where can you be? And from there, what can you see? Can you see all the elements of the playground? Will you be able to look up and see your children at all times? Are the exits situated so that you can see a child leaving either on their own, just wandering off, or accompanied by somebody with ill intent? And once you kind of got a sense from that, the physicality of the playground, also take a look at who's there, what's the vibe like, how close is moving traffic, and those more general aspects of the playground. If you just do that, run through that checklist each time you come to a new playground, you'll make the whole situation safer for your entire family. Question 44. I've recently moved to a city and I don't want my team going anywhere without me. How can I keep him safe from all these new dangers? So I'm going to twist this one a little and remind everybody that the city is not inherently more dangerous than the country. There's more crime in the city, sure, but there's less heavy equipment near where kids are playing. There's fewer large mammals, and the hospitals are closer in the event of an injury. The real question here isn't about the city being more dangerous than the country or the suburbs any more than it is about a trip to Guatemala or Myanmar being more dangerous than a trip to Chicago. What's really going on is that the dangers are different than the ones you're used to. When you're at home, you know where the dangers are. You know that in the winter, this particular curve on a road is in the shadow of some trees, so the ice there stays longer than the rest of the road, and you need to be careful. You know which parks are sketchy. You know which neighborhoods are safe. When you go to a new environment, the dangers are different. And so what you want to do is find out about what dangers exist when you go somewhere new. And that's whether you're moving there permanently or going there on a quick trip or going on an extended vacation. Now, we were lucky enough to interview Chris Story, who's an instructor at the ESI Bodyguard Institute, for a season 3 interview about advances. And that's when a security team goes to a place and researches a place before they bring the person who's hired them and look for those safety issues. Now, we can't hire a team to go to our next vacation spot and check everything out, but we can use the internet, make calls to hotels, call friends who live in the area, call AAA if it's here in America, and do some basic research about what hazards exist and whether those hazards are increased crime, whether it's an environmental issue, whether it's a poisonous animal that's local, if you're going to go visit Australia or somewhere like that. So doing that advanced research is how you will find out what the dangers are in the area and then figure out a solution for those dangers so that you can let your teens go be teenagers in this new space. Number 45, my ex lost custody and I'm worried they will try to take our child. What can I do? This is probably the hardest question that I got of the 50 questions for this interview, and it has no clean solutions. It's a very challenging situation, and if it is yours, I would encourage you to talk to some professionals who are trained on this. I'm a bit out of my depth here. I've only encountered the situation peripherally. When I was running my karate school, we had a couple of parents who were in that situation, and we needed to make a plan for if that non-custodial parent came to the school and tried to interact with the child or take the child. And of course, it's made even more difficult because in many cases, your child still loves their other parent and wants to see them and is happy to see them and trusts them to take care of them. So this very difficult situation requires professional grade assistance. And I encourage you to get it. And in case you need to hear it, there are experts at this exact thing who can help you. Now, in the meantime, clear communication is what you need to begin to solve this problem. You need to communicate clearly with your child about the situation, about why, even though they love their parent, it's not safest for them to go with them, about what systems you have in place about picking them up and dropping them off so that they know if something wrong is happening, and making sure that they can talk to you about any communication attempts their parent has made with them or anything funny that they've noticed. You need very clear communication with the school. Make sure that they know exactly what's going on. Make sure that everybody in that school who interacts with your child, who watches the bus ramp, knows about the situation and what to look out for. And while you're at it, talk to piano teachers, soccer coaches, any other adult who will be responsible for your child when you're not there at a time that that non-custodial parent could come. And finally, make very clear communications with the authorities, the school board, the superintendent, your principal, if you're having any issues at the school, local law enforcement. Let them know where they might find your child's parent in case they do get them and you have to go find your child. Make all those communications with all of those people as clear and as frequent and as effective as possible. And while that's happening, also set up a safe infrastructure in terms of how you move around with your child, where your child is left with various people who aren't you, how you keep security in your home, so that the routines that you establish and the rules that you set encourage your child to be safe and reduce the likelihood that they'll be vulnerable to being taken. As I said, this is a very difficult situation, but those are some things you can do at the beginning to set yourself up for the safest response possible. Number 46, how can I keep my kids safe in a parking lot? The real hazard in a parking lot is unpredictability. When you're walking down a normal street, you know, cars are going this way and cars are going that way. You can usually count on the pedestrians crossing at the crosswalks. Everybody has a reasonable expectation of what's going to happen next. In a parking lot, it's very different. Everybody's parked. You're not sure who's going to move when. There's lines of sight exposed. You don't know how exactly the pedestrians are going to walk around. That creates a more dangerous situation. And so what you do is you remove the unpredictability by increasing visibility. You walk where you are plainly visible. You hold hands with your children. You keep them close to you. Maybe have your child push the shopping cart. If you have multiple children, you can daisy chain. Create a larger, more visible mass of people for the cars to see as they move around. While you're at it, be tactical about how you park. So if there's two lines of traffic or two lines of cars, rather, right there next to the entry, but two lanes over, there's almost nothing and there's clear lines of sight all over the place, go park over there. And also remember, it's not cheating to draft off of another shopper. So if you've got somebody ahead of you pushing their cart, go ahead and get right behind them so that you've got an even larger mass of plainly visible, clearly seen people that the cars moving around will be able to see and avoid. Number 47, do they still have block houses for kids to go to, and how are they identified? So for folks who don't know, block houses were a thing back in the 80s when we all got scared by this imaginary stranger abduction epidemic that was largely manufactured by sensationalist media. The truth is that stranger abduction is vanishingly rare. It's very, very unlikely that your child will be snatched off the street. But at the time in the 80s, we were all panicked about it. And so the idea of a block house, a place where kids can go and be safe, even though they didn't know the people who lived there, if they felt unsafe for some reason. Now, those are largely no longer a thing, but some of that idea is pretty sound. And that's having places for your children to go if they are on their way from somewhere to home and feel unsafe. And the best thing that we can do is walk those routes with our kids, walk to school and back, walk to the soccer field and back, walk to their friend's house and back, walk to the hobby shop downtown and back. And while you walk with them, look around for houses they could go to and identify which houses, what kind of house would be a good place to go. And start with the golden rule of child safety when you're not around. If you can't find your parents, find someone else's parents. So look at the houses that clearly have children living in them. Look for toys, bikes, things like that. Evidence that there's a child living there. Also look at the houses for which ones have adults home at the time your child's going to be walking by. In a lot of situations, when we're not stuck in COVID, of course, there's houses that are empty during the times that children walk to and from school. So find the ones that have adults home during the day. And then look for signs about whether that adult is responsible. Is the lawn mowed neatly, or are there tools and beer cans strewn all over the place? Talk to your child about each house and listen to them identify which ones they would go to in a situation where they needed help immediately. It could be if they're being approached by somebody that they don't think they can trust, or it could be if they fall down and skin their knee, or if there's a couple of bullies coming down the other direction, whatever it is. But that kind of training, walking through their routes, identifying the places they could go to be safe, fulfills the purpose of those block houses and teaches your kids even more skills. Number 48, how can we best stay safe from COVID and other diseases? As some of you know, this is being recorded in the middle of the 2020 COVID pandemic, and that's on a lot of people's minds, especially now as cases are going back up. But the good advice about keeping yourself safe from COVID has not changed. Wear a mask when you go out in public, socially distance whenever possible, pay attention to situations so you can stay out of crowds, so you can avoid people with symptoms, make choices about how you're going to get groceries and food and other supplies so that you don't expose yourself, and wash your hands for 20 seconds with warm water and soap whenever you feel the need. And those things are the best practices for staying safe from COVID. Now, in general, it's washing hands and safe care that'll protect us from most other diseases. And again, modeling, living by example, are how we will teach these to our children. If our kids see us eating poorly, not getting enough sleep, not washing our hands, they'll follow that example and be more at risk for diseases. On that topic, it's also important to remember that the top killing diseases of people in the developed world, they aren't the big headline-grabbing scary things like COVID or Ebola. It's heart disease, cancer, diabetes, diseases that if we take care of ourselves, we have a lower risk for having. So while we're doing that modeling for our kids, making sure that we get good food, that we minimize the things that are unhealthy, that we get a good enough exercise, take care of ourselves in that way as well. That's another part of keeping our kids safe from those diseases, by showing them how to lead a lifestyle that keeps us safe from them. Number 49, what's the best way to make sure my teen drives safely? Well, you've heard me say this before, I'll say it again, modeling. Remember, we live by example. The way we drive is how our kids will learn to drive. And of course, they're not going to drive as safely, and they're going to experiment with speed, and they're going to mess up. But overall, if we drive unsafely, they will think that's how you're supposed to drive. If we drive safely, that's how they'll think you're supposed to drive. And beyond that, install an internal dash cam. Every study shows that if you have a dash cam looking at the inside of the vehicle, the driver will drive more safely. That's true of teens, that's true of professional truck drivers, that's true of just about everybody. So put that thing in there, and your child will drive more safely and more responsibly while they're behind the wheel. And also it gives them a little bit of defense against if they get into a fender bender and somebody tries to claim that they were being irresponsible in the car beforehand, you have footage that can come in and save the day for them in those situations. All right, finishing up with question number 50. I heard stranger danger isn't a thing anymore. What's that about? And that's right. Stranger danger was another thing we tried in the 80s, also part of that whole child stranger abduction epidemic that didn't really happen. And we tried it, and it didn't work. And here's why. First of all, the adult who's going to hurt your child is overwhelmingly likely to be somebody they know. That's a terrible fact of life, but it is an unavoidable fact that strangers are not as dangerous to your child as some of the people they know. Second, when we were doing the Don't Talk to Strangers thing, a number of people did research. And for example, they asked kids to draw pictures of strangers. And the kids drew pictures of people with horns, demons, monsters. Some other research around there would have them give the kids a don't talk to strangers lesson and then have them play in a park, and then strangers would walk up and lead them right out of the park. And when asked later, the child would say, "That's not a stranger. They were nice." So the don't talk to strangers thing gave kids this strange, weird idea of what a stranger was. And then finally, talking to strangers is part of life. And we don't know the person behind the cashier. If we need help, we will go to a stranger. We talk to strangers constantly, and we model talking to strangers all the time. And so don't talk to strangers is useless. What is useful is to talk to our kids about what kind of stranger to go to when they need help. And that's really important because A, it teaches our kids skills to navigate the world that we actually live in, and is something that we can model. And second, if your child is lost or needs help and you're not around, if they go to a stranger and ask for help, the chances that that particular stranger means them harm are extremely small. However, if they just stand there, not sure what to do, and somebody approaches to offer help, chances are that's not going to be a bad person, but it's much higher chance than the stranger that they approach, because bad people in a crowded area with children will be looking for vulnerable children in that situation. So our child needs to know which kind of stranger to approach for help so that they have permission within themselves to go get that help. Now, the best kind of stranger to approach is another adult with children. If you can't find your parents, go find someone else's parents. Because first of all, the chances that that person's a bad guy are essentially nil. And second of all, as a parent, you know that if a child came to you lost, you would stop at nothing short of endangering your own kids to help them reunite with their parent. Second best is an older woman. We're talking grandma age woman. Third best is an employee at the place that they are standing, or a law enforcement officer. Well, there you have it, everybody. 50 answers to 50 questions. I want to thank you for sticking with us for these episodes. I want to thank everybody who put some questions in for us to answer. If you love what you see here, please do remember to hit the subscribe button and the like button. Check us out on Facebook. If you really love us, come support us on Patreon. We'd love to continue doing this for as long as we're useful. And those little actions on your part, they really make a difference. So thank you again for being with us for these first 50 episodes. I cannot wait for you to see what we've got coming up until episode 100. Thanks again, everybody. Stay safe. Bye for now.